way Locust came together is a long story in terms of how long it took to form the band. It started with me and Alexi. When we met, we started writing riffs immediately. We kind of straight away knew that we had an interesting chemistry, and the sort of blend of both of our styles would make for some interesting songwriting, and there were things that we had in common that were exciting, and there were things that we were quite different in terms of how we approached certain compositional elements that also like felt as though there was something interesting that we could mine there. So it started with us, and then we found Euler was a mutual friend of mine. Patrick auditioned through the Guiltless video that we put online, and Alex was the one that we struggled the most. We had quite a long period where it was just the four of us and we were looking for a singer, and eventually, in and amongst auditioning other singers quite extensively, some of them, I thought back to Alex, who I knew back in Portugal. We did one gig together once when we were kids, and I just remember him being very charismatic and kind of eccentric and having an interesting energy and having this, I don't know, I think at that point when we were auditioning singers, what I was really looking for was someone who had more of a character and an attitude, more so than something specific sonically. And so I thought back to him, and I hit him up to see if he was interested. And then we kind of started working on some vocal tones and stuff like that, and just seeing what kind of sound we would like to get out of him. And once we'd done that a little bit, then we started, I started flying over there just to work with Alex and start putting vocals on the songs that we'd already written. So yeah, that's how the band itself came together. But what inspired us to pursue that specific blend? Well, even from the beginning, when it was just me and Alexi writing music, and even before that, actually, I'd sort of had visions, I guess, of the kind of band that I wanted to end up in. And what I kind of, part of the identity of what I was looking for was something that could encapsulate basically everything that I love about different areas within metal music. Like you said here, the groove side of it, the thrash side of it, certain death metal influences, but also just a lot of atmosphere, and a lot of melody, and a lot of sort of very expressive elements, and sort of, I guess also a more aggressive side to it. What inspired me specifically, I guess, to make that the specific blend was just wanting to find a way to integrate all those different things into one project and do it in a way that sort of made sense and felt coherent. I guess that was part of the idea going into it. This was back when it was just me and Alexi, and we were struggling to find a band name. But Locust was the name of a demo that he had brought in, which didn't actually end up on the first album. It's something that we're working on for the second album. And it was sort of he had like a couple of riffs, and he'd called it Locust, and we fleshed that out, and now that's a sort of finished song instrumentally, and it's one of our favorite songs from the second album. But there was a point in amongst the sort of whole process of looking for a band name where we didn't have anything good, and for me, I just felt like that would be quite a cool, I don't know, partly it's the whole, I don't know, there's a sort of biblical aspect to it, I guess, and a sort of symbolism that goes along with that, this sort of plague metaphor. And there was a few riffs that we had at the time which felt like this sort of chaotic frenzy of, some plague-like thing. And I remember that sort of resonated with that kind of energy. But honestly, it was less to do with that and more just, it wasn't really literal. It was more, just the word itself, the fact that it had these aggressive consonants and had this sort of angular look to the word itself. It really came down to that. It was more of an unconscious sort of identity thing, more so than a literal thematic thing or a meaning thing. It was just the word itself being quite visceral and aggressive. Well, basically, me and Alexi wrote the whole album instrumentally before finding the rest of the band. And when we found Euler and Patrick, both of them had their inputs on, their own parts, for sure. But in terms of the actual songwriting, it was all kind of done at that point. A lot of it was just me and Alexi kind of throwing riffs at each other, and I think there was a very conscious aspect of the process, at least on my side, of trying to integrate both of our personalities into one sound. I think that partly because of just the fact that when we met and started, playing around with or noticing the differences in our styles, it felt really interesting to me to try and capture that energy. So yeah, a lot of it came from that, and trying to, the first songs that we wrote were Eradication 1 and Guiltless, and those were a lot more sort of thrash and death metal specifically, whereas from there then we branched out. I think the next one was Parasitic. And a little bit down the line we started playing around with a little bit more melody and a bit more kind of structuring the songs for vocals, writing songs like Anima and War of Opposites. And then finally and we actually, interestingly enough, had recorded the entire album instrumentally before meeting Alex and finishing the vocals. So the songs were all kind of set in a way. And then finally we found Alex and wrote the vocals for the album, and then at that point recorded the vocals. So it was a little bit disjointed, and honestly, it was all a bit of a mission. And I think on the next album, we're really looking forward to finding a much more streamlined process and, doing things in a more traditional manner and order, and just, doing it all in one go sort of thing, not having these big gaps of time in between, recording this and recording that, and kind of how long things took, partly with lockdowns and all that sort of thing, but also the delay that we had of finding a singer, let alone writing the whole album for vocals and all that sort of thing. I think this time around we would much rather keep things a lot more intuitive and, have a certain flow to things, all in, and kind of have one complete experience rather than the disjointed process that recording Infidel was. Well, they definitely do reflect the band's experiences, because I wrote a lot of the lyrics. I would say a lot of them were me throwing ideas at Alex and seeing what he thought. There's one song on the album that Alex was just left to his own devices to write his own lyrics for, and yeah, the rest was me kind of struggling with it, honestly. And when I was writing the lyrics was around the time that we met Alex, and by that point, that was a long time into this whole process, and it was quite a frustrating time for us as a band. And so a lot of those lyrics are drawing on exactly that frustration. And I think as a result of that, it wasn't really a conscious thing, but it turned into quite a self-reflective or, self-referential concept in terms of this struggle and, the strain of trying to stay motivated. I would say that that's partly the name Infidel came about, partly because I was thinking of this idea of faith and the idea of trying to retain faith in a process, kind of thinking of it as a religious process almost, and trying to stay motivated and stay disciplined and have, keep that commitment intact, but struggling to, honestly, and, struggling to retain that sort of purity of faith without it being corrupted by a sense of bitterness or a sense of, nihilism or whatever, losing hope in that process, or, losing your faith. Because there were definitely points where that is how, not just me, but I guess all of us felt about the whole thing, having this album that we felt so strongly about, but not, just not managing to find someone who could put the right vocals on it and match the kind of energy that we wanted to get across with the vocals. So yeah, a lot of it comes back to that theme, and I would say that's the central theme of the album. It's not exactly a concept album. It's not a story arc that flows through the whole album, but I would say that every song explores an aspect of that in some way, and not really consciously. Like I said before, a lot of it is just, I don't know, drawing on experience, but under the umbrella of that kind of theme. Well, we all share, there's a few bands in common that we all really love. I would say Meshuggah, Gojira, Lamb of God. Those are the big ones, but everyone has, their own slight different tastes. But I think, as far as I'm concerned at least, I would say that the influences that we draw on are less like wanting to sound like a specific band or a specific, subgenre or whatever. It's more just trying to express a certain thing and, finding a way to execute that. Like, it's more conceptual, maybe. Like, something that we want to achieve with our sound is an aspect of sort of aggression, and we're very sort of, that's a big part of it. We talk about violence in our sound, whether that's like a result of picking hard and hitting the drums hard and really leaning into the physical connection to each instrument, including vocals for sure. And things like that. I think it's more important to us to kind of bring that out of ourselves rather than try to imitate or follow a certain sound by other bands. Well, because it's been such a strange process of us writing these songs before forming a band, and then have the people come in and shape the songs based on their own identities and their own musical DNA, it'll probably be more apparent on the next album to see how we've sort of grown as a unit, all five of us, and starting to write songs with all of us specifically in mind. But throughout, the process of writing Infidel, I would say that it started off more specifically aggressive, and songs like Guiltless and Eradication 1 being the starting point of where we found ourselves wanting to write very aggressive kind of riff-based thrashy music. And then I think as it went on, we got a bit more interested in probably not dynamics, but sort of different colors, I guess, and different textures, and wanting to sort of explore the same identity but flesh it out a little bit. Kind of, what would that band sound like if the volume was turned down at 1.5 instead of being on 11 all the time. And it's something that we love about, going back to influences, some of the bands that we love. Like, it's interesting to see a band who is in touch enough with their identity to be able to explore different avenues and still sound like themselves. I think that's definitely something that we strived for on Infidel. Even having songs like Futile, where it has that in mind of, I wanted it to sound like Locust, but just on a very dialed back sort of dynamic. And yeah, I think as the album went on, when you start writing an album, I think partly because we knew all along that we wanted our first release to be a full album. And so when you start, then you're kind of just experimenting with, writing this song, writing that song. Whereas as we got further into the process, it was more a case of like, what does this album need? What would complete an album like this? And that's where songs like Gin would come about, where it's like, it would be really cool to complement these, faster, more aggressive songs with something that really takes its time and kind of sits in a certain atmosphere and, has a slow building aspect to it. And same with Futile. Like it was, those songs kind of came about more to fill in a bigger picture that we had in mind. And so, yeah, I guess the sound sort of evolved organically in that sense. Well, another aspect of this that's been interesting is the fact that we, did all of this, wrote and recorded the album and everything, and, had these music videos and stuff all before getting on a stage together. And I think it's definitely been interesting to do it that way around. And I think the gigs that we've done and will continue to do will definitely inform and mold the next album. The gigs that we've done so far, some of them have been really significant for us. Our first real gig was our album launch, which was in London with a lot of friends and family attending, and it just felt like a lot of people who had been waiting to see what we would do were there to support us, and that was a very inspiring occasion. And then the gig directly after that was a slot at Bloodstock Festival, and that was a massive crowd. I don't know, it felt like we really had to prove ourselves a bit more than our album launch. Felt more like a big party of fans and friends who had been waiting for that for so long, but Bloodstock felt more like a big crowd of people that didn't necessarily know who we were or know the songs, and so we had to sort of, fight for some level of proving ourselves, I guess. But that was a great moment, especially, playing some of the older songs that we've had around and people are used to. It's been satisfying to deliver that in a live setting. I would say playing Guiltless at Bloodstock was pretty fucking cool. That was definitely a moment of connecting basically the very first song that we wrote together, me and Lexi, like back in the day before all of this. connecting that experience to, a very inspiring window into, I guess, the potential of what it could be like to be playing on that level. I guess that's what festivals are a little bit. It's playing to a much bigger crowd of potential fans, and then trying to sort of match that when you go back to your own headlining gigs and stuff like that, and try to, eventually bridge that gap, I suppose. And so yeah, that felt very inspiring, that specific experience. Might be a slightly esoteric perspective to go on, but I would say one of probably the best strategies is to keep your relationships in the band as pristine as you can, because at the end of the day, that is the situation, is you're going to be fucking locked in a metal tube with these people. And so the best thing you can do is make sure that, first of all, that the people that you have in your band are people that you can get along with and see eye to eye with to a certain extent, but also, people that make you laugh and people that, you enjoy spending time with. I think for us, that's also been a pleasure of this, the experiences that we've had in terms of traveling together and doing gigs together and spending this time together, is that we're still quite new to each other's personalities in that sense, even with all the rehearsing and all the recording. It's been really fun to just hang out, all five of us, and talk a bunch of shit and fuck around a little bit, and just, the standard shit that goes along with being in a band. From the way that people have responded to, I would say, the music itself, the album and the material, I see us as a band with a lot of potential. I think we have a strong sense of identity in Locust, and I think that's something that is really important for a band, and something that luckily we've had the time to really focus on and try and dial in. And so I think that specifically gives us, I don't know, that there's something cool about that. And then now I think with that in mind, it's up to us to sort of, in a promotional sense, or you could even say like a marketing sense or a business sense, it's up to us to sort of capitalize on that, I would say, and bring that to as many people as possible and spread the word about our band. And so I see us kind of, we're a very new band, and we have a lot of work to do to, climb up the ranks in the metal scene. But I think we have a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see where we can get to. I'd say the supportive elements have been, it's been very reassuring to have people reach out and, be explicitly supportive of the album, or, certain videos that we've put out, or, yeah, it's really, I think people don't understand how energizing it can be to get a response like that. Or, for us specifically, we had one of the first videos that we put out was Guiltless, and it was featuring Crim, and somehow that sort of, I guess, went viral a little bit. And the benefit of that for me, especially, I would say, is the fact that because it reached such a wide audience, it meant that, I'm not so fussed about the breadth of the audience as much as the depth of the connection that it had with a few people, and the people that really, there were some people expressing a lot of excitement, to us, sending us messages and reaching out by email and whatever, and really being in our corner and expressing how exciting it was to hear a band sounding like that, or, having a bit more of an old school approach, or whatever it was. People connected to different aspects of the music, but I guess my point is just that was really energizing, and really, I would say, helped me, and I guess us, but specifically it helped me to stay motivated when, during times where I wasn't particularly motivated, just to have that kind of response being semi-present during that time, while we were recording and losing our minds trying to find the right singer and that sort of thing. That really meant a lot. The best strategy is just to fucking write music that people like. No one gives a fuck, really, if your Instagram content is exciting or flat, or, that's not going to make or break any band. The make or break point is, does anyone fucking want to listen to your music? And so really all you can do at the core of things is that, there's the music itself, and then there's the way that you promote the music, and it all comes back to the music itself, really. You can't promote a turd. So yeah, number one is just to be true to your own expression and write music that actually moves and resonates with yourself. because that's really the only perspective of the quality that you can actually trust, is how you feel about it. Yeah, the whole financial side is extremely depressing for any band at our level. It's, it's something that you just have to accept, really, that it's going to be a bit of a money pit for quite a while. We've had a very no compromise attitude towards the album itself, and I would say that extends out into merchandise and stuff. But yeah, we've definitely been struggling to fund a lot of this, especially to get it to a standard that it sort of has to be for us to live with it, which is that is an aspect of the plague of being an artist. Is we're not doing this for fun. I would say there's obviously fun aspects to it, but I would say a lot of this is compulsion, and it does mean a lot, whether things are done right or not done right. For example, an area of solace for me at this point, when we're having frustrating times trying to find tours that we can do and branch out the band from the point that we're at now, something that's inspiring to me and continued to be motivating is the fact that I'm so happy with the album. And I think if we didn't have the money to record drums and had to have MIDI drums, or if we didn't have a budget for reamping and had to just use plugins on the guitars or whatever, and that would, for me personally, and I'm not generalizing out to other people, I know everyone has their own relationship with these aspects of things, but I think for me, if I felt like there was a missing depth, or like if I was in a position where I had more money but was less happy with the album, it would be more of a struggle to stay motivated towards pushing this as hard as I can, and feeling so satisfied and proud of the album itself is definitely a source of motivation for me to keep pushing the band out into uncharted territory. Yes, there have been moments like that. Yeah, those are sort of inevitable. It's just whenever you're in a creative enterprise like this, it's going to mean a lot. Like I said, a lot of this is compulsion. It's just, this is how we express ourselves, some of us, But how to prepare yourself, I would say, for those kinds of situations. A lot of it is prevention rather than curative. I would say just being honest at all times with your band, and being very open about the way you feel about anything, whether it's creative or non-creative. Speaking your mind and learning how to communicate honestly but respectfully, I think, is just such an important part of any relationship with anyone. And it especially does apply to having a 5-way, communication within a band. It's complicated. It depends very much on the situation. And it also depends on the sort of style of, I guess, governance of your band. You can have things where you just vote, and it's democratic in that sense. But I think a lot of times it helps to have some sense of hierarchy. I would say I guess it comes down to how you want to manage your own band, but I think it helps to have an understanding of where certain people's authority or confidence lies. If someone specifically is a bit more attuned to the management side of a band, or if someone's a bit more experienced with, let's say songwriting or writing lyrics or whatever, then it makes sense for that person's view to hold a little bit more weight. But it's hard to maintain clarity with that and not let that mechanism devolve into egotism, which is always the temptation, especially with any of this stuff. So yeah, it's tricky, that is for sure. It's probably one of the hardest aspects, I would say, of being in a band is literally that, trying to maintain that level of unity in a band. And especially, I don't know, personally, I've always found it much easier to work one-on-one with people. I think as soon as there's more people involved, I think just me, the way my temperament is wired, I just find it harder to navigate that sort of social situation. I guess there becomes, it sort of turns into a social situation with its own sort of social dynamics. Whereas if you're just working one-on-one with someone, then there isn't really that aspect, and so it's, you know, you can be a bit more focused with it maybe. So I don't know, things like that have helped for me. I think part of the solution to that is just to understand that it's just not a reliable source of feedback. We don't really feel those pressures, honestly. I think we're a band that takes a lot of pride, I guess, or sees a lot of value in authenticity, especially where the music itself is concerned. So I don't know. I don't know. Personally, I think the most interesting thing we could do as a band is explore our own identity through our own perspectives. We know our band better than anyone knows our band, and you know, the identity that is Locust means more to us, really, I guess, than anyone else. And so it makes sense to just base it on that, rather than looking externally for some sort of validation, just to express something. I think there's something central to the artistic process about exploration and just kind of forgetting about what you want to achieve with this or that. It's not really about achieving, it's more about exploring and searching. And so I think if you can kind of shut that part of your brain off that wants to achieve that or this or that, or it's much more interesting to just search for something to express and then express it as clearly and powerfully as you can. I think that's basically the best approach to creation of any kind, and that's something that we try to maintain in the band. Yeah, I'd say it's been pretty fucking demanding mentally and emotionally for all of us in the band. The way to get through that, apart from, I mean, part of our strategy was, for me personally at least, was to feed that strain and that exhaustion, feed that back into the album, and kind of write an album about how I was feeling about that. So that kind of helped in terms of expressing it in real time, I guess. But I would say that the best way to manage that is to make sure that there's some aspect, at least some aspect of the band that remains fun, and not just fun, but rewarding and satiating and gratifying. And, you know, that'll be the gigging aspect usually, the live aspect, provided the live shit that you're doing is actually cool, which is a hard point to get to as well. But, you know, even in terms of the rehearsals, like, have some ritualistic, consistent thing that's fun and keeps you motivated. Whether it's like hanging out as a band, you could, you know, have some ritualistic aspect of that, which we don't really have. Some of us are further away. Or, you know, the songwriting or something, just have some aspect that is really revitalizing and outweighs all the shit, because there is an inevitable plethora of shit. And that it'll always be like that. It's inescapable. And so you're not going to avoid that. All you can do is kind of buttress it by, you know, mounting enough opposing pros against those cons, and, you know, put as much weight on that side of the scales as you can. Yeah, this is something I kind of have thought about a bit. It feels very arrogant to, I don't know, there's something arrogant to considering something like this, you know, like, how do I want to impact the greater metal community? It's sort of like, why don't you fucking shut up and book a few gigs? But I don't know, I think there's something powerful in our style of music about the expression of a lot of this quite dark energy and aggressive undertones and stuff like that. And I think when I think of the greater community, I think that that's something that, you know, everyone could work on. And I think that that's something that I need to work on, and that the music, and I would say also the lyrics, have been an avenue for that, making me sort of learn to be a bit more explicitly communicative, or able to convey certain things and express certain things that are easier, you know, at least in the short term, to hide away. So I would say that, being an example even to myself of that, or trying to live in line with that, or be the change I want to see in that sense, cringy as that might be, is helpful and orienting in a helpful way. I guess what would I like for Locust to contribute? I guess an awareness of, and potentially an integration of, or comfort of assimilating a sort of darkness, or I think that basically is what Locust is for me, is to try and integrate those kinds of feelings, and be a way to express that, and not just blindly exercise it, because I think that's been the case with the instrumental side of the music, is I'm not really aware of, it's not something I'm explicitly aware of, my relationship to those kinds of painful feelings or demons in that sense, but you just release them through music, and it's definitely cathartic and it is helpful. But I think that was something that I found really hard about writing the lyrics, was the fact that now I have to actually explicitly fucking lay this stuff out on the table and interact with it in a way that is a lot more strenuous and a lot more real than keeping it abstract and more purely symbolic in a sort of sonic form, having it actually be words and using language to express those ideas rather than just sound. Definitely was stressful in a whole different way, in terms of coming to terms with certain things or being honest about certain things and trying to confront those sort of aspects of my temperament that need work, and exploring the way they manifest themselves, and that sort of shit. I would just, there's no specific message other than gratitude, I guess, for especially the people that have stuck by us and been patient. We know that we took a long time to get the album right and get the songwriting the way we wanted it, and specifically the vocals to match the right energy, and all of that took time. And then even just the production of the album took a long time, and to have people that have stood by us during that whole time and waited patiently for what ended up being Infidel, and even to come to the shows. It's been really gratifying to meet people at the gigs who have been waiting so long to see us play these songs live. So yeah, just a huge thank you to anyone that's stood by us throughout this whole time. It's hard to think about questions like that without just descending into hippie bullshit, but honesty is real helpful. Keep a clean relationship with your band. I would say that. I think that's sort of probably the most important thing, because you can overcome anything. If you have a sense of unity within the band, then you as a band are a much more powerful force to contend with all the bullshit that will be thrown at the band from the outside, which is all inevitable as we've been through. But yeah, that's the most important thing, and that's the thing that will fuck things up the most if you don't. So good luck with that. Not really. No. Hail Satan.